So one of the hottest topics in the live service gaming landscape right now is, of course, Marathon, the upcoming game from Bungie, the OGs behind Halo. They definitely know what they're doing, or at least historically they have. But Marathon has been quite the interesting little fella, you know, in recent memory. And part of that is because I think it wasn't what people were expecting. I think that is a big component of it. I also think that it's not ready. Like, for lack of a better term, it's not ready, okay? I said when I went to the studio to try it that it felt like there was this dissonant thing where they announced that it was coming in September on the same day as Borderlands 4, which we'll circle back to because that's insane. But I also point out that, like, they're 5 months from launch, and they said the two revolutionary things about this game is the ranked mode that they have not designed yet, and the fourth map, which will come after launch. I believe they've said now it's mid-season 1, which could mean a month and a half after launch if they're doing 3-month seasons. If they're doing 6 months, it could be 3 months after launch. It's not super clear. But the two things they're most excited about with this game that they think really sets it apart are coming after launch, most likely, because I don't think the ranked mode is done by launch. I'm calling it. I think they delay that at the very least. But now the narrative has started to really shift around it. Just this morning, Paul Tassi from Forbes wrote an article collecting a lot of the impressions and opinions from various people that basically say that they think it should be delayed. They think Marathon is not ready. And part of this is because player counts, even for the play tests, have started to fall off pretty drastically. Big streamers have fallen off of it already. And yes, it is an alpha, but it's an alpha that has the only game mode that the game will have at launch, features 2 of the 3 maps that will be there at launch, and still has a lot of the progression stuff, a lot of the core fundamental mechanics that will be in the game at launch. It's just missing the 3rd map. That's it'll have tighter gameplay, things will be balanced a little bit better, but the game that we have at the alpha is the game. I mean, it's not going to be totally different once it launches again in 5 months. It's just not. And player counts are starting to drift off, which you would expect to see in a lot of playtests. This is hyper limited, to be fair. They've only invited a select group of people in the closed alpha playtests, and they've not opened it up to the public. So the open beta will be more indicative, to be very clear. But I think that this should be relatively concerning at this point, because it shows, I think, that from the content creation space, from the streamer space, they don't feel there's enough here to really sink their teeth into, which is a problem, because a lot of the people that are currently in the closed alpha are the big streamers that you would hope would be playing this, like the Shrouds, the Tim the Tatmans, those kinds of guys that can keep games afloat if their 50, 60,000 viewers are watching and playing as well. But if they're not interested, if they don't think there's enough there, you're fighting an uphill battle. And when you pair it to a lot of other stuff, such as the fact that as of right now, 1/3 of the playable character loadout is not in the game currently. We've not seen them. We haven't seen the gameplay demonstrated for them. We don't know exact abilities or anything. So 1/3 of the playable roster is just MIA. 1/3 of the maps we've not seen. The ranked mode, which allegedly is going to be awesome and amazing, hasn't been built yet, and the 4th map that they say is really good is coming after launch and is not going to be ready. And there's a lot of other things they've said that they'd like to do, that like a social hub, for example, that they plan on bringing after launch. And the entire narrative starts to really feel like this game is being rushed out the door, and you gotta wonder why, because at this point I think it's pretty clear the game is not where they would like it to be 5 months out from launch. They have a lot of work to do, very clearly so. And even when you talk to the devs, a lot of them would say, we're early. We're very early. Well, we're early, but we're working on that. Yeah, the design for the ranked mode is really early. Bitch, it's 5 months away. It's you don't have time to be early. This is the time where you're polishing your finish. A lot of games that are 5 months out, they're doing betas and stuff, getting player feedback, balancing stuff, and they just spend 5 months polishing. To still be building the core mechanics that close to launch is worrisome. It just is. But it makes you pause and wonder, okay, well, what's going on? Well, ladies and gents, we have a conspiracy theory to present today. Okay, we have a conspiracy theory. Buckle up. because I'm about to break your brain. This was first mentioned in chat. We had some people come in and mention it. And then I dug into it a little bit, and I want to share it with you because there's some interesting tidbits. The first thing is that I want to establish one of the core pieces of this, which is that Bungie has been in trouble for a while, and there are some major components of this that need to be considered that I feel like are easy to brush over, okay? The first thing is that Bungie's undergone a lot of layoffs in recent memory. Like a lot, okay? Destiny veterans like Luke Smith, Mark Noseworthy, phenomenal name, by the way. Mark Noseworthy. I would kill for that last name. Can you imagine? I love it. It's great.
Kane donated $10 through Super Chat. You were right about E33, Luke. Holy Baguette, the game is a legit masterpiece. Thanks for covering it.
You're welcome, Kane. I'm glad you're loving it. It just keeps getting better. I'm telling you, just buckle in because you're in for a journey, an experience. Doesn't Mark Noseworthy sound like a name that like a really bad random name generator would come up with? You know, no disrespect, of course. I'm jealous of the name. I wish my name were Luke Noseworthy, but still, it's a remarkable name. But as you can see, in a newly surfaced report, this was August of last year, it appears Bungie veterans Luke Smith and Mark Noseworthy have parted ways with Bungie following the company-wide layoff that affected 17% of its staff on Wednesday. We have a lot of like short-term memory loss in the gaming industry just because stuff happens so much. But less than a year ago, 17% of all Bungie staff were laid off because Destiny 2 was doing so poorly. Financially, at least. That's crazy, okay? It gets even crazier, okay? It gets even crazier. We didn't know exactly how big Bungie was and how wide sweeping these layoffs were until there was an interview with the former chief legal officer at Bungie who said the following, okay? So this is Don McGowan, interviewed on the IATSE show and with Chrissy Felmuth. And it says something very, very interesting here real quick.
And so there isn't really, because we don't really care. But if somebody's a real fucking problem, that follows around. But I'll tell you, like there were 1,600 people at Bungie when I was there.
1,600 people when he was there, okay? Pin that number, 1,600 people. What did we find out just recently? What did we find out? In a blog post in July of 2024, the company was down to 850 members after integrating some roles into Sony. This means they eliminated likely over 700 jobs in less than a year. That's crazy. Okay? Like, do you know the term decimate? The term decimate comes from like an old, like a historical military term where like, was it the Roman legionnaires or what? Either way, it was for when like a legion of or a battalion of soldiers did something bad, or like there was a mutiny or they ran away and you know, went MIA, and then they would decimate the unit or the battalion or whatever and reduce them by a tenth. So they would kill one of every 10 soldiers. As a punishment for the entire group, they would kill one randomly selected person out of 10, and they would decimate the unit. It's like a whole thing. Okay. That's like, to decimate a team is to reduce it by 1/10. They reduced this by a lot more than a tenth. Okay. Like the Bungie of even 2023 is largely majorly transformed. And it kind of goes with another thing that surprised me when I was at Bungie, at the actual studio. The Bungie studios are like super empty. Like it's a huge place. It's a gorgeous building and like in Washington, beautiful. But it was surprisingly massive with not many people in it, which maybe it was just like people were working from home that day. I don't know, but it definitely felt a little hollow. And seeing these numbers now, it starts to make a lot of sense. But there's more drama, okay? Because you remember I mentioned that they're releasing this on the same day as Borderlands 4, which seems insane. It seems like, why would you launch your game that's a first-person shooter that's based around like a lot of loot? Why would you release that on the same day that another massive game like this is launching? Like, it can't help. It has only negative side effects launching on that same day. I cannot imagine an explanation where that is like a strategic play that helps Marathon. I don't think it helps at all. So why are they doing it? Why would they launch on the day? Why not the day before? Why not the week before? Why launch on the same day as Borderlands? It's almost like they want it to fail. What? Luke, no, you don't mean to say that Sony wants this not to go well. No. This is where the conspiracy. Okay, so this is like totally, this is BS. Okay. We're about to put a massive tinfoil hat on, getting crazy. I'm not even saying I believe this, okay? But we're going to play with it, okay? We're going to go down the rabbit hole and get stupid, okay? Then at the end of it, we can offer the counter as to why this probably isn't true. But I'm trying to paint the picture, okay? So that you can fall down this rabbit hole with me, okay? So buckle up, buckaroo. There's been a lot of drama in recent, like the last 6 months or so, with Bungie specifically, over allegations that they are intentionally trying to cut budgets and reduce the workforce as much as possible in order to retain certain financial goals and targets, okay? What it seems like has happened is after the Bungie acquisition, there were certain what they call like deferred equity deals that were made. And all that really means is that when Sony buys a company like Bungie for $3.7 billion, they want Bungie to be the same company that they meant to buy. So they say, we buy you at this price. You will get your portion or the majority of your portion of the buyout in 2, 3, 4 years or whatever, given you achieve these targets, which makes sense. Like, yeah, if you buy a car, you want the car to have the same engine in it did when you were shopping for it, right? Makes sense. You have a deal where you're like, I'm buying a company that's made up of people. I don't want those people to leave the second I buy it, such that it's no longer the company I wanted to buy, right? And that's what they did with a lot of the leaders, senior designers, executives, and stuff like that. But they only get their payouts if they hit certain financial targets met. Like if they achieve certain profitability levels, if they hit certain margin ratios, if they hit these goals. And it seems like there's been a lot of infighting, even among former Bungie developers, alleging that senior executives at Bungie are trying to cut the budget where they can and save money where they can to keep hitting those targets or to get close to the targets or to hit them outright. And they're playing dirty to do it. That's the allegation. You remember the former game director on Marathon was a guy named Chris Barrett, and he's suing Sony and Bungie for $200 million. This is the guy that was the game director on Marathon, got booted out of that position and replaced with the current game director, Joe Ziegler. Joe Ziegler, former creative director or game director rather on Valorant. Definitely knows his stuff. He's not a nobody, but this guy, Chris Barrett, was booted out of game director role and replaced with Joe Ziegler. And basically what the allegation is, this also comes from multiple allegations, and this is important. This comes from multiple allegations according to a report published from Jason Schreier. According to the report, at least 8 different female employees accused Barrett of making them feel uncomfortable and of behaving inappropriately towards them. In this lawsuit for $200 million, Barrett claims that he was wrongfully terminated in March of 2024 following a sham investigation into misconduct allegations, which he claims were manufactured to deny him nearly $50 million in contractual payments. As you can see, according to the lawsuit, Sony and Bungie falsely accused Barrett of gross misconduct as part of a larger strategy to scapegoat him for Bungie's business struggles and to avoid fulfilling his retention agreements, which again, he says are worth $50 billion. Okay. Barrett's lawsuit calls the investigation leading to his dismissal of textbook scapegoating, alleging that Sony and Bungie exploited the hashtag MeToo movement for financial and reputational gain, basically blaming him for all of the shortcomings. Per the report, defendants were to pay Barrett $36,811,044 in 2022, which was paid. That's insane. That's ridiculous. That a game director was making $37 million. That's ridiculous. $1.8 million in 2023, which was paid, and $45 million from 2024 to 2026 as follows. 3 payments of $941,000 each for unvested RSUs in May and November of 2024, and May 2025, 3 payments of $14.25 million each for revested shares, including a premium bonus in July of 24, July 25, and July 26. Okay? I'll break this down in just a second. Barrett is seeking not less than $200 million in damages and other equitable remedies, including the $45 million plus interest for payments due under the retention agreements, defamation damages, along with punitive damages totaling at least $100 million, exemplary damages of $45 million plus interest, attorney's fees, costs of suit, violations of Washington law. And Barrett's also seeking reinstatement to his role as franchise game director at Bungie. Okay, and then the whole document's here, so you can even read it yourself if you want. But basically, there is a thing that is called deferred equity distributions or deferred equity disbursements. There's, the D can mean many different things, but basically all that really is the idea, again, is when Sony buys them out, you get paid if you stay with us, if you don't leave, if you keep your talent here, and if you keep hitting these goals. He's claiming he was booted out, not just to take the blame for Sony's or Bungie's problems, but he claims he was booted out in order to save the $50 million that they owed him so that they could cut the budget, appear more profitable because they don't have to pay him that anymore. And that helps the other executives who stayed hit their targets to get their payout. And this is all total allegations, okay? These are all just allegations. There is a lawsuit for a reason. He's taking this in. They're going to argue it and try to see, whether the evidence points one way or another. I don't know. It could be that he is the allegations were true about misconduct and that's why he was fired. And the executives are like, and now we also don't have to pay him the bonuses. Problem solved. And maybe it was also because he was moved out of position prior to all of this. He was going to be franchise game director and he was going to do that before he was let go. Yeah, following Barrett's move to Florida over a series of discussions with Bungie leadership, Barrett was informed that Bungie was changing his responsibilities, with Barrett being replaced by Ziegler as game director for Marathon and becoming franchise game director. So they moved him out of game director into franchise game director, whatever that means, but he wasn't that thrilled about it. Because they undid all of that. Because remember, again, it was originally that you would just be kind of a generic runner and all of the customization came from gear you had, similar to games like Tarkov, for example. But Ziegler came in, turned it into a hero-based extraction shooter, and that's why he was frustrated, because they undid a lot of the stuff he had fought for so hard in the early stages of development. But this is also why Marathon seems probably largely unfinished at this point, because they rebooted it 2.5 years ago. Joe Ziegler has been at Bungie for 2 years and 5 months. You don't make a live service game like this in 2.5 years. You just don't. It takes more time, especially when you reboot everything as fundamental as whether the players are choosing basic characters that they fill out with gear, or if they're using heroes. Everything has to be redone. All of the abilities, all of the quests, all of the balance, the different weapons, the gear loadouts have to synergize with different playstyles from the different heroes. The level design has to change. If you have certain enemies or certain heroes that can do certain types of moves, you have to have the level design account for that. It's a huge undertaking to pivot from non-hero to hero-based, and they've had to throw it together in 2.5 years. The allegation is basically that he's being booted out to be the scapegoat, and so they can save money so they hit their financial targets. And potentially that other type of shady moves might be being done, such as launching the game on the same day as Borderlands in order to say that Marathon failed. They can shut down the team, they can kind of clean this out, and the executives can then technically hit their profitability targets because they were able to get rid of massive swaths of employees, going from 1,600 developers down to, after another round of layoffs, maybe down to as little as 400 to 500 working just on Destiny 2. And then the executives that are currently there get to vest all of their deferred equity disbursements and leave with tens of millions of dollars in their pocket. Basically, the allegation with this conspiracy theory is that the executives at Bungie are intentionally driving the plane into the ground so that they can jump out the back with their parachutes and take all the money with them. And that's why they're intentionally launching it when it's not ready. They're intentionally launching it on the same day as a massive game that is going to have crazy amounts of money behind it. I mean, I'm sure Take-Two's going to throw so much money into the marketing of Borderlands. It's going to be crazy. They did it last time with Borderlands 3. They're going to do it again here. Like, that's the conspiracy theory. Okay. That's the conspiracy theory. Everyone gets a parachute, right? Right? It's like the opening of Dark Knight. Remember when it's like, well, yeah, one less cut, as they take everybody out to just whittle it down until there's just the Joker left, taking all the money with him because he got everyone out. Basically what it is here. Now, let's shift gears. Take the tinfoil hat off. Is this likely? No. Okay. It's a funny, interesting story, okay? It's very like, what's the show, Succession? You know, House of Cards or whatever. It's very scandalous. And it starts to kind of like maybe make sense where you can look at it and be like, oh, well, yeah, this is all corporate intrigue and they're intentionally making the game fail because they want to make higher payouts. But here's the deal. Here's the reality of the situation. And hopefully I did a decent job of painting this conspiracy theory for you, you know, so we can probably just tear it down. But here's the thing. Like, most companies, the distributions don't get paid out unless the company is doing well. I would bet a lot of money, not $45 million, but I would bet a lot of money that in the deferred equity disbursement agreement, or whatever it would be called, they probably required that Marathon launches to a certain like Metacritic score or launches to a certain number of players or a certain amount of day one revenue. They probably had deals like that in the contracts with this stuff. They probably had agreements like that. So executives and senior leadership at Bungie couldn't just drive the company into the ground or not show up to work for 3 years and then still get paid out. Sony only wanted to buy them out for $3.7 billion if they were going to continue performing well, which they haven't. I mean, they just haven't. The $3.7 billion acquisition of Bungie was probably the single worst gaming acquisition in terms of finances in recent memory. It's just been a disaster. So, well, Embracer, I guess, gave them a run for their money. They bought a lot of studios and immediately closed them, but whatever. It's just been a mess, you know, on this crazy high scale. So typically with these deals, like they thought of this. The lawyers thought of it and made sure that they couldn't just intentionally make Marathon flop and be like, ooh, we reduced the workforce, so now we're profitable. That's not how profitability works. And if they really were so short-sighted as to have it be like, okay, you get your payout if you get it so that, you know, your margins are at 10%. And like, okay, so we'll just shut everything down, fire all of our employees. And then, yeah, we'll only be bringing in 1% of what we were before in terms of revenue. But because our team is so small, we still hit the 10% margin rate. We win. If they were if Sony were so short-sighted and, you know, Bungie leadership, you know, had that deal lined up, then I guess this is the outcome they deserve. But most likely, that's just not what's going on here. Most likely, I think what's happening is that Sony is telling them they have to get this out the door because they've been working on it for 5 to 6 years. They hope to get it out there, to polish it up, improve it as time goes by once you get player feedback, and to just get the ball rolling on it. Because next year, they have to launch the Horizon Online game, which probably, I mean, I'm guessing comes out early next year, because that's also been in the works for years and years and has like 400 people working on it. And then they have Fair Games. They have, I think there's like is it NC Soft? They're doing a Horizon MMO thing. There's a bunch of other things they're working on. They just have to get it going. They just have to start putting stuff out and moving past this Jim Ryan era of live service games. And I think that that's the most likely explanation. You know, there's the old term Occam's razor, which is whichever answer to a question, whichever solution requires the fewest variables, the fewest assumptions, it's probably the right one. In order to believe this conspiracy theory, you're buying into the idea that there's like 15 layers of conspiracy of the executives at Bungie firing 1,000 people in order to get their big payout. Like, you're talking about basically the entire board of directors being sociopaths, which I guess isn't that far out of the realm of possibility, but like you're talking about a crazy number of things that have to be true, that have to be assumed in order for that to end up being the case. Whereas on the flip side, if you look at the other explanation, which is just that Sony is kind of sick and tired of all these live service games and just wants to get it out, I think that makes more sense. And especially like the age-old story for Sony, especially, it's kind of really been a problem the last decade or so with Horizon, is that Sony seems to at times overestimate the power of their franchises. They overestimate the power of their brands. And, you know, you see it with the Lego Horizon, with the Horizon VR games, where they're trying to do a Horizon movie, where like a lot of people are like, yeah, I think Horizon's fine, but like I don't care that much about a Lego spinoff. Like I'm good, you know. But it could be a similar thing here, where they're like, no, it's Marathon. This is Bungie. Of course it'll be Borderlands. What are you talking about? It's Bungie. Never attribute to malice that which can be adequately explained by stupidity and hubris. And in this case, I think stupidity and hubris is something that PlayStation recently has had in droves and dare I say buckets. And it seems like that is a sufficient explanation for all of this. So as fun as the conspiracy theory of Bungie being intentionally destroyed in order for executives to get out with massive bags, as fun as that conspiracy theory is, and it is based on little nuggets of truth here and there. Yeah, the executives are waiting for their distributions to pay out, and then they probably leave. Yeah. But that's also true of pretty much any other company in the history of the world. If you were working somewhere and you're 50 or 60 years old and you get a $50 million payday, you're probably retiring too. Probably are, because that's just how this works. I mean, that's just how it is. That's not scandalous. That's not crazy. That's just normal, I think, you know? But when you take little pieces of that stuff and you try to tie it together into this web to build a conspiracy, it can seem believable, but I think you have to step back and just look at it for what it is, which in this case, I think is just most likely an instance of Sony just wanting to get the game out the door so they can move on to the next thing and they can work on building it into something players will connect with. I think that's most likely what it is. I don't think it's likely that it does get a delay. I know, Paul Tassi is arguing for it to be delayed, and I understand, and I personally think it should be delayed. I think the game will be better at launch if they delay it and include the ranked and include that fourth ship at launch, but I don't think they do. They should. I don't think they do, because I think if they could delay it, they would not have announced a release date, period. But I think that they just have to get it out the door. And Sony's just said, enough is enough. And that's where we're at. I don't think that they will walk away from this like Concord. People are like, oh, Concord 2. I don't think that's what this is. I think it probably, if I had to predict right now, it probably launches to kind of a very muted response. I think some people will dig it and will play a lot of it and eat it up, but it's going to be pretty small, is my guess. And then a year will go by, 2 years will go by, and they'll build it up. People forget the initial launch of Destiny also was not great. A lot of people were frustrated by it, and it just took time. And I think that's what's going to happen here, is it's going to take a while for them to build it into the game that is worth really sinking your teeth into. I would wonder at that point, well, why not just delay it to that point? But I think for them, community feedback, player feedback is a crucial component of it. But we'll see. I mean, that also assumes that Sony's going to give them the time and the money to continue working on it for a year or two until it gets to where it needs to be. And that's not a given anymore after their response and reaction to Concord. Because they could have stuck with Concord. They could have kept that going and just worked on new updates and new content. But instead, they scraped it from existence, which is, I think, the only time something like that has ever happened. So I wouldn't put it past Sony, but I think it's much less likely that they do that here. I think they probably launch. It's kind of muted. Player numbers aren't very good, but they build it up. And probably after a year or two, it's pretty damn solid. It's probably pretty good at that point. But that's because I think the game is still like a year and a half, 2 years out from being where it needs to be to justify a premium price tag. But they probably eventually get there if they're given time and money. But that's where we're at. Hot take: this game doesn't look as bad as Concord. I don't think that's a hot take at all. I mean, I think this game is, there's a lot more game here than there was with Concord. With Concord, you're talking about just a very, very anemic offering. And it just was not interesting. At least this has some unique elements and some fresher elements, like the heroes integrated into the extraction experience. But I still think it's not ready for prime time. But we'll see. You think Sony let it burn cash for over a year? I mean, the thing is, they can let it burn cash for over a year while out with some people buying it and playing it and buying skins and stuff, or they can delay it and burn cash with it behind closed doors. And I think Sony's just like, just put it out. We'll make some money while it's getting developed. But it's basically going to be early access. I mean, that's basically my problem with it, is that it seems like they're going to be launching it in early access, but they're pretending like it's a full game. And I'm like, I don't see it. I don't see it. I mean, they could look at Fallout 76. You're right, Snake Historian. You're right. I mean, Fallout 76, the fact they stuck with that, they built Fallout 76 into a successful live service game. Let that settle for a second. Fallout 76, way worse than Concord ever was. Way worse than Marathon could ever be. And they ended up turning that into something profitable. It's about sticking with it. I think they could have turned Concord probably into a decently successful live service game. Not a Star Wars level success like Herman was reported to have thought, but probably a decently successful game if they had stuck with it, but they chose not to. And I'm sure there were many reasons why they chose not to. They probably were like, this team is crazy expensive. It can't reach profitability with this team the size it is and with where the studio's located. So they just decided to can it, but it's pretty wild. He took my thing.